Professor, thank you very much for joining me. Can we start just by working out what some of the trigger factors are for psoriasis?
Yes, well, probably let me start with the fact actually that there is so much needless suffering by psoriasis. And if we say that, we are mostly referring to trigger factors which are avoidable. The trigger factors may, for instance, be obesity. They may be smoking, and you might guess they are also drinking. But then additionally, it's also infections. Basically, if you know about that, it is possible to avoid them to a certain extent. And if you do avoid them, you can also avoid a lot of suffering.
One of the ones you haven't mentioned, of course, is trauma. And I see a lot of patients, far more than I did when I first qualified 30 years ago, who are having tattoos. What do we do to educate patients about the role of trauma in bringing on psoriasis, for instance, the Koebner phenomenon?
Well, interestingly, Koebner was the one to first describe this effect on a tattoo, which was in 1890. And that was obviously a time when tattoos weren't that popular as they are today. And I think it is one of the great challenges for dermatology to avoid tattoos. If you've got an idea, I'd be absolutely happy. But obviously what we just can say, we must make people know. And our experiences with patient education and trying to raise some kinds of health literacy, and also by that empower people to decide which way they want to live, is that if you tell them, if you speak to them, if you have a discussion with them, that then frequently afterwards they will say, why hasn't anybody ever told me before? I would have changed my life.
Sadly, I see an awful lot of patients with type 2 diabetes, with dyslipidemia, with hypertension related to obesity. Do you really think patient education, even the right patient education, can help patients with psoriasis?
Yes, absolutely. Obviously, I'm an optimist. But then we've got extensive experience with patient education, for instance, in occupational skin diseases, and to a certain extent, rather relevant extent, it's also psoriasis, which is being triggered by the same factors which you have been mentioning before, that at their workplaces they get this problem due to mechanical trauma, for instance. And we feel that there's a great many of them. If you really approach them the right way, and obviously if it's a two-dimensional and not only unidirectional way of speaking to patients, discussing their problems, that in many incidences you are really able to change their knowledge, and that may lead to even change attitude and change behavior. Obviously, you will never reach everybody.
One of the most challenging problems I think I as a GP face with patients with psoriasis, and there are many, is the patient with psoriasis who drinks to excess. Because I find there a real vicious cycle. So many of my patients with psoriasis have depression. So many of them drink because they're depressed and because of their psoriasis. Then their psoriasis is worsened by the alcohol, so they become more depressed. What do we do about this?
Well, I think your observation is absolutely true. But then knowing this, we have to find ways to lead people out of this vicious cycle. And we feel that this is possible. Obviously, the first thing, if you have a systematic approach to diagnosis, to management, and to therapy, I think in so many patients you will be able to really substantially improve the severity of their disease. And that will also, obviously, influence all the other steps within this vicious cycle. And then, again, we think that patients' education is one of the ways to help a lot of patients to redefine their ways of living, and getting them together with other patients, which is provided by patients' organizations, can also be extremely helpful, because there is mutual support and they meet other patients which have the same problem and which probably have found ways of solving it. And we feel that this can be extremely helpful.